Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to the Q-Man channel. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing and giving this video a thumbs up. Today, we are going to discuss the movie Inside Out 2 from 2024. The familiar bustling control room within Riley's mind experiences a sudden, seismic shift. Riley, now a seasoned 14-year-old hockey enthusiast whose singular focus has always been that glowing scoreboard of success, finds her established core emotions, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust, completely blindsided. The arrival of the new crew signals not just a birthday party, but a deep-seated adolescent awakening. Joy, ever the meticulous stage manager whose entire ethos is built on maintaining Riley's seemingly perfect trajectory toward hockey stardom, finds her carefully constructed lighting rig thrown into chaos. She's always envisioned Riley's life as a finely tuned symphony, much like the perfectly executed penalty kill she'd love to see happen on the ice. Then they appear. Anxiety, a whirlwind of jittery energy always looking 3 plays ahead, a definite kindred spirit to a high-strung sports agent planning a draft pick years in advance. With her comes envy, perpetually comparing Riley's burgeoning social status to others. Envy, who clearly harbors secret ambitions to direct a critically acclaimed indie film rather than just manage a teenager's social calendar. Then there is ennui, a languid presence suggesting that perhaps the sheer effort of existing is too much, reminiscent of a washed-up musician forced to play the same tired hits in dive bars. Finally, there is embarrassment, often lurking just behind the scenes, terrified of being exposed under the harsh stadium lights. Anxiety immediately takes the reins, believing Joy's methods, based on simple, immediate happiness, are hopelessly outdated for the complexities of high school social dynamics. She eyes Riley's burgeoning friendships and burgeoning social media presence with predatory focus. Her primary directive is preparation, an obsession that mirrors that of a method actor studying a script for months before stepping onto set. The conflict escalates as Riley attends a high-stakes hockey camp, hoping to impress college scouts. Joy and the original team realize that their old maps, charting routes directly to moments of triumph, are useless now. Anxiety, however, is in her element, pulling levers that prioritize fitting in over genuine enjoyment. She reroutes memories, the beautiful golden recollections of past achievements, into the vault, replacing them with glowing amber memories steeped in worry about tomorrow's tryouts. The core group, exiled to the recesses of the mind, discovers the idea thumb, a vital piece of Riley's self-concept that Joy had always guarded jealously. As anxiety's influence grows, she begins discarding these core beliefs, viewing them as liabilities. There's a particularly poignant moment when a memory concerning Riley's early love for a simpler, less competitive game is almost destroyed, a testament to anxiety's belief that the past has no bearing on future success. The climax arrives during the final scrimmage. Riley, overwhelmed by the pressure anxiety has manufactured, the crushing weight of parental expectation mixed with peer scrutiny, freezes. She performs poorly, not because she lacks skill, but because her emotional landscape is too crowded with what-ifs. Joy realizes that happiness isn't the only necessary component. Sometimes, allowing a bit of worry helps you practice harder. Sadness, who has quietly observed anxiety's frantic efforts, finally steps forward, not to bring Riley down, but to validate the fear and pressure she feels. It's a realization that complex emotions must coexist. In a powerful moment of integrated mental processing, joy and anxiety finally reconcile. Joy accepts that planning and worry are necessary defenses, while anxiety learns that unchecked control leads to paralysis. They combine their efforts, allowing Riley to accept her imperfect performance with grace. Riley doesn't win the big prize at camp, but she makes a genuine connection with a new peer, finding a different kind of fulfillment. The control panel is repainted, now featuring a broader spectrum of colors, symbolizing a more complex and ultimately more authentic teenage self. The introduction of the new emotional contingent really highlights the inherent tension in growing up. That forced maturation where simple joys aren't enough to navigate the complex social architecture of adolescence. Anxiety, whose every movement suggests she's running late for a critically important board meeting, is particularly captivating. She operates with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate raider, convinced that any moment not actively being used to secure a better future is a moment wasted. A stark contrast to Joy's previous, sunnier management style, which felt more akin to a community theater director focused purely on making the current scene sparkle. Envy, meanwhile, has this brittle, overly curated persona, always glancing sideways at the glowing spheres representing other people's successes, much like an aspiring novelist constantly checking the bestseller lists, convinced that their own manuscript will never measure up. Her quiet ambition feels deeply corrosive. Ennui, conversely, is the embodiment of creative burnout, perhaps reflecting the soul of a once promising filmmaker who just can't summon the energy to leave the couch anymore. She moves at a pace that suggests even blinking requires too much commitment. As anxiety tightens her grip, the memory storage system begins to reflect this shift. The vibrant, saturated colors of pure past delight fade slightly, tinted now with an anxious undertone, like old Kodachrome film left too long in the sun. Fear, who was always the nervous security guard, finds himself completely eclipsed, his job of managing immediate threats now secondary to anxiety's long-term catastrophic modeling. Fear's worries were about tripping on the stairs. Anxieties are about failing to secure an entire life path based on this one ice hockey tryout. The journey of the core group into the deep recesses of the mind is almost a philosophical descent. They are navigating the subconscious archives, the parts of Riley's identity that aren't immediately useful for social performance. When they encounter the personification of imagination, perhaps an eccentric architect who's always sketching impossible skyscrapers, they find a temporary refuge. This area is clearly where the wildest, least practical ideas live, the very stuff anxiety desperately tries to pave over with sensible, actionable plans. The emotional core of the narrative rests on the realization that these new emotions aren't inherently villains. They are necessary evolutionary baggage. Anxiety is, in her own way, trying to protect Riley from disappointment, channeling the desperate energy that fuels many great, albeit stressed, innovators and executives. But her methods are too singular. She mistakes control for competence. When sadness finally finds her moment, it's not through dramatic pronouncements, but quiet empathy. Sadness understands the weight of feeling overwhelmed, a sentiment that fear always shied away from, preferring action. Sadness doesn't try to cheer Riley up. She simply sits beside the distress, acknowledging its reality. This silent validation is the antidote to anxiety's frantic attempts to suppress any negative data. The final integration is less a victory parade and more a complex merger of departments. Joy doesn't eradicate anxiety. She learns to schedule her. She sees that anxiety's planning skills, when tempered by her own focus on the present value of the experience, create a much more resilient framework for Riley. Riley's final act on the ice, a moment where she chooses connection over a perfect score, is the ultimate testament to this emotional detente. The scoreboard still matters, but now it shares the stage with the quieter, more fulfilling metrics of genuine human connection, signaling that Riley's identity is finally becoming a complex, multi-authored screenplay rather than a simple, straight-to-video sequel of her childhood joys. The evolving emotional landscape necessitates a re-evaluation of Riley's entire system of beliefs, the very scaffolding of herself. The central conflict truly crystallized when anxiety, in her quest for optimal future positioning, started tampering with the very foundation of Riley's character, the glowing orbs representing deep-seated values. These orbs, once solid monuments to honesty, kindness, and playfulness, began to flicker under the strain of anxiety's continuous risk assessments. Anxiety, like a stressed-out film producer convinced the current cut is box office poison, wanted to replace playfulness with something more strategic, something that looked good on paper for the college admissions committees years down the line. Disgust, whose primary function had always been to vet the sensory inputs, rejecting truly distasteful social interactions or questionable snacks, found herself strangely aligned with anxiety's goal of maintaining a perfect external facade, albeit for different reasons. Disgust was less worried about future failure and more concerned with immediate social contamination, adopting a haughty, judgmental air that bordered on outright cynicism, much like a jaded theater critic reviewing a long-running, predictable Broadway show. Meanwhile, anger, the fiery, passionate defender of Riley's sense of fairness, became restless in the background. His explosive energy, previously channeled into reacting against perceived injustices in childhood games, now had nowhere constructive to go, leading to low-level, simmering frustration that only exacerbated Riley's feeling of internal gridlock. He missed the clear, immediate antagonists of earlier years. The exile of joy and sadness forces them into deeper contemplation of their roles. Joy, looking at the dimmed, dusty memories, begins to see that her relentless pursuit of peak moments left Riley unprepared for the mundane valleys in between. She acknowledges, perhaps for the first time, that sadness's quiet presence during moments of failure actually afforded Riley the necessary space to process pain, a crucial step in building emotional resilience, something that Joy's effervescent interventions always seemed to skip over. Sadness, observing the new crew, recognizes that her utility isn't about creating misery, but about signaling to the outside world that Riley needs support. She is the silent beacon for help, a role anxiety completely fails to comprehend in her self-sufficiency complex. The tension surrounding the memory vault becomes almost physical. Anxiety views the past not as history, but as a database of potential mistakes to be avoided, leading her to aggressively compress and encrypt moments of genuine, unscripted fun, labeling them inefficient. This act mirrors the modern pressure on ambitious young people to constantly monetize their hobbies or structure their downtime into productive networking. When Riley finally falters on the ice, unable to execute the flawless play anxiety has choreographed in her mind, the ensuing emotional feedback loop is devastating. Anxiety panics, viewing the mistake as definitive proof of her own failure, plunging the control room into red alerts, a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is only when sadness gently steers Riley toward accepting the sting of the moment, allowing a genuine sigh of disappointment, that the pressure valve releases. Joy, seeing this acceptance, understands that true strength isn't avoiding the fall, but knowing how to land. The resulting clarity allows Riley to look up, see a friendly face, and share a genuine, if slightly disappointed, smile. This shared moment, unfiltered by the need to perform, solidifies the new emotional ecosystem, one where complexity is not a malfunction, but the very essence of maturity. The reintegration of the emotional team into the main console marks a pivotal moment, akin to a successful corporate restructuring where old guard and new management finally agree on a cohesive mission statement. Joy, shedding some of her bossy optimism, begins to actively champion sadness's role, realizing that empathy acts as a crucial shock absorber against anxiety's relentless forward momentum. She observes that sadness's quiet validation allows Riley to actually absorb feedback, rather than just reacting defensively, much like a critical director whose harsh notes are only effective if the actor feels fundamentally supported. Anxiety, though humbled by Riley's on-ice paralysis, doesn't vanish. She transforms. Her relentless energy finds a more focused, manageable outlet. She morphs from a panicked micromanager into a meticulous strategic planner, similar to a celebrated documentary filmmaker who meticulously researches every historical detail, but now trusts the cinematographer, Joy, to capture the beauty of the moment. Anxiety's planning becomes less about avoiding disaster and more about preparing contingencies, ensuring that Riley has several viable paths forward, rather than just one impossibly perfect one. Envy, witnessing Riley forge a genuine, unforced connection with another skater, a bond rooted in shared imperfection rather than competitive one-upmanship, experiences a crack in her own brittle facade. She recognizes that envy is exhausting, an endless comparison game that yields no internal reward. Her desire to direct shifts slightly. Perhaps she starts sketching out scenarios where characters find contentment in their own lane, recognizing that critical acclaim often follows authenticity, not imitation. The fate of the discarded core memories is crucial. As the new balanced system takes hold, those golden orbs aren't destroyed, but are integrated into a deeper archive, now illuminated by the wisdom gained from the recent turmoil. They serve as the foundation, the undeniable proof of past happiness, which gives anxiety the confidence that Riley isn't starting from zero, but from a solid base of positive experience. This mirrors the process of an established author realizing their early, simple works are just as vital to their legacy as their complex later masterpieces. The final emotional consensus reached on the console is one of necessary tension. Riley's adolescent identity requires both the drive to achieve, anxiety's input, and the grace to fail, sadness's contribution, all underpinned by the fundamental joy of living in the moment, joy's oversight. When Riley finally smiles genuinely at the end of camp, it's not the blinding, uncomplicated smile of her childhood, but a nuanced expression, a quiet acknowledgement of effort, acceptance of imperfection, and appreciation for a new friend. The entire mindscape settles into a richer, more complex hum, ready for the messy, multifaceted drama that is high school. The aftermath of the emotional merger sees the control room buzzing with a new, sophisticated form of activity. It's less the frantic energy of a startup launch and more the steady, rhythmic operation of a well-funded foundation beginning a major, long-term project. Disgust, having witnessed the breakdown caused by pure facade maintenance, undergoes a subtle recalibration. Her cynicism softens. She realizes that rejecting something too quickly, based on superficial appearance, much like dismissing an early draft of a brilliant screenplay because the cover art is poor, can mean missing genuine substance. She starts focusing her vetting process on toxicity rather than mere awkwardness, allowing for necessary, if sometimes messy, social engagement. Anger, finding that the high-pressure environment has somewhat dissipated, channels his intensity into constructive defense mechanisms. He becomes the internal advocate for setting firm boundaries. When anxiety tries to overschedule Riley's free time with optional skill-building workshops, anger flares up just enough to insist on necessary downtime, ensuring Riley doesn't burn out pursuing goals she no longer truly owns. This new anger is the internal negotiator fighting for work-life balance, a crucial skill for any high-achieving individual trying to avoid total collapse under professional strain. Ennui, surprisingly, finds a slight spark when the emotional spectrum broadens. The sheer drama of the past upheaval momentarily broke through her apathy. She begins to see that even boredom is an emotion, a signal that current stimuli are inadequate. She starts cataloging moments of extreme monotony, perhaps viewing them as necessary whitespace in Riley's personal art exhibit, the quiet gaps between explosive movements that give the performance meaning. She is slowly morphing into the emotion that recognizes the need for genuine rest, not just passive disengagement. Joy, ever the student of management, has learned the hard lesson that orchestration is not control. She steps back from actively driving every moment, instead focusing on curating the environment so that other positive emotions, like the quiet satisfaction derived from sustained effort, have room to bloom. She often stands near anxiety now, offering a gentle check. Is this preparation serving Riley's authentic self, or just the idea of success? This collaboration prevents anxiety from veering back into catastrophic thinking. The final, lingering image of Riley is one of quiet self-possession. She understands that growing up isn't about achieving a permanent state of joy. It's about maintaining a functional cabinet of emotions, where every member, even the uncomfortable ones, has a voice and a purpose. Her success on the ice that day wasn't measured by scoring the winning goal, but by her ability to recover from a fumble, share a laugh about it, and immediately refocus, demonstrating an emotional agility that Joy, in her former singular focus, could never have engineered alone. The control room is now a sophisticated, responsive command center, ready for the unpredictable seasons of adolescence. The new equilibrium established within Riley's mind is fragile yet robust, much like a complex theatrical production that has finally found its rhythm after disastrous previews. The key change is the elevation of self-awareness, a meta-emotion that begins to subtly guide the console's operation. This emerging self-awareness feels like an experienced stage manager overseeing the entire operation, ensuring no single emotion monopolizes the spotlight for too long. Fear, previously marginalized by anxiety's sweeping, future-focused panic, finds a renewed, sensible purpose. He reverts to managing immediate, tangible threats, a quickly approaching car, the potential for a mild social faux pas, rather than the existential dread anxiety manufactured. He becomes Riley's internal safety advisor, the one who checks the harness before the climb, rather than the one insisting the climb is impossible. His dialogue, once shaky, becomes clipped and precise, reflecting the efficiency of a seasoned safety inspector. Disgust evolves further, becoming the guardian of Riley's developing aesthetic and moral compass. She stops being merely judgmental about fashion or social trends and starts actively protecting Riley's emerging sense of self from things that feel fundamentally inauthentic or manipulative. She guards against ideas or peer pressures that try to force Riley into a box that doesn't fit, embodying the protective instinct of an artist, fiercely defending their unique creative vision against commercial pressure. Anwi's subtle shift is perhaps the most intriguing. She doesn't become energized, but she becomes selective about her apathy. When Riley is genuinely engaged in something meaningful, even if it's hard, Ennui remains dormant. She only awakens when Riley engages in repetitive, unfulfilling tasks driven solely by anxiety's outdated external metrics. Ennui thus functions as a highly accurate internal sensor for soul-crushing obligation, signaling, "This is not worth the energy expenditure." The relationship between joy and anxiety becomes a constant, productive negotiation. Joy learns to appreciate anxiety's foresight, realizing that anticipating challenges is key to long-term satisfaction, not just immediate pleasure. She starts treating anxiety's forecasts like a choreographer treats a demanding rehearsal schedule, necessary for perfecting the final performance. Meanwhile, anxiety recognizes that joy's input is vital for ensuring the performance is worth watching. Without joy, all preparation leads only to a hollow, technically perfect execution that lacks heart. They are, in effect, co-directing Riley's life, one focused on the present feeling, the other on the future structure. The ultimate testament to this maturity is seen in how Riley handles minor setbacks following the camp. A missed assignment or a slightly awkward conversation doesn't trigger a full-blown emotional crisis. Instead, the console lights up with a balanced array of colors. Sadness colors the disappointment. Anger flares briefly to motivate corrective action. Anxiety calculates the best path forward for remediation. And joy ensures the experience is cataloged not as a disaster, but as a learning moment, all under the watchful, quiet guidance of the emerging sense of self. Riley is no longer trying to be perfect. She is learning to be resourceful. The deepening complexity of Riley's internal world brings forth a new, subtle layer of emotional processing: the need for vindication and self-advocacy. This feeling manifests not as anger's explosive defense, but as a quiet, resolute determination to have her internal experience acknowledged by the external world. This need centers primarily around the burgeoning relationship between joy and anxiety, as Riley begins to consciously articulate her feelings to her parents and peers, often feeling misunderstood. Anger, sensing this shift from internal pressure to external communication, refines his role further. He becomes the guardian of Riley's narrative authenticity. When Riley feels pressured to paint an overly positive picture of her struggles to appease her well-meaning, but perhaps slightly overbearing parents, a common pressure point for high-achieving children, anger pushes back against the manufactured happiness. He demands that the truth of the struggle be acknowledged before any solutions are accepted, acting as an internal editor ensuring the spoken story aligns with the felt reality, much like a writer demanding editorial integrity over marketability. Envy, still observing the social landscape, finds herself interacting more directly with disgust. They form an unlikely alliance in policing authenticity. Disgust rejects anything she deems shallow or performative in social media posts, while envy critiques the perceived lack of originality in others' displayed successes. Their combined effort results in Riley becoming more discerning about the connections she fosters. She starts valuing depth over sheer popularity, recognizing that superficial admiration, which envy once craved, is ultimately hollow. Fear, now functioning as the level-headed risk assessor, becomes vital in helping Riley navigate new social territories without relying solely on anxiety's paralysis-inducing worst-case scenarios. When Riley considers trying out for a new extracurricular activity that has nothing to do with hockey, perhaps the school debate team, an endeavor that requires public speaking, a domain previously untouched, fear calculates the odds of simple failure, stumbling over words, and ensures that anxiety's looming threat of total social exile is kept in perspective. This allows joy to focus on the potential enjoyment of learning a new skill, rather than the fear of immediate judgment. The most significant development is how the consolidated core emotions treat the new emotions. Anxiety, envy, and ennui are no longer temporary invaders. They are integrated departments with specialized functions. Joy facilitates meetings where these formerly disruptive emotions can present their data without being immediately overridden by the mandate for happiness. This structured dialogue ensures that the underlying concerns driving anxiety or envy are addressed constructively, rather than just suppressed. It's the equivalent of a successful CEO creating formal committees for departmental feedback, rather than holding impromptu, high-stakes shouting matches in the executive washroom. Riley's adolescent experience is proving to be the ultimate crucible for emotional intelligence, forging a mind capable of embracing the necessary friction between ambition and contentment. The maturation of Riley's internal management system leads to a fascinating dynamic shift. The introduction of nostalgia, which begins to seep into the control room not as a memory itself, but as an emotional filter applied to past events. This new layer, gentle and tinged with a wistful gold, seems to be managed by a collaboration between joy and sadness, indicating that true appreciation of the past requires acknowledging its fleeting nature. Nostalgia serves as a calming agent, proving to anxiety that past joys were real, and not just illusory successes manufactured for a fleeting moment of validation. This new nostalgic perspective directly impacts how embarrassment, who had been lurking silently since the initial upheaval, chooses to present itself. No longer crippled by the fear of public exposure, embarrassment starts curating moments of past awkwardness, not for ridicule, but for shared human connection. It highlights the time Riley totally messed up a presentation, but everyone laughed with her, not at her. This transformation mirrors that of a seasoned comedian who has learned to mine their own painful history for relatable, unifying humor, turning potential weakness into social currency. Ennui, finding a purpose in cataloging monotony, actually begins to assist in this process by identifying when Riley is forcing herself through activities she truly despises purely out of obligation, the hallmark of inauthentic living. Ennui's gentle wave of boredom acts as a stop sign, preventing Riley from investing energy into obligations that yield no emotional return. thus freeing up mental space for activities that joy and the strategic anxiety can collaboratively deem worthwhile. The ongoing negotiation between joy and anxiety is now frequently mediated by sadness. When anxiety proposes an extremely rigorous, high-risk plan for a future academic milestone, it is sadness who gently interjects, saying, "If this fails, Riley will be deeply disappointed. We need a plan for comfort, too." This acknowledgement forces anxiety to build an emotional recovery time and lower the stakes from absolute success or utter ruin to best attempt with an acceptable fallback. This nuanced approach is what truly allows Riley to embrace challenges without the threat of internal collapse hanging over her head. The final scene, perhaps not on the ice but in a quiet moment of reflection after a difficult school week, shows Riley looking at an old photograph from childhood. A gentle sigh escapes her, a complex sound that contains a hint of the uncomplicated happiness of the past, filtered through the understanding of the complex challenges of the present. All the emotions are present. Anxiety is calculating the schedule for the next week. Disgust is ensuring her backpack doesn't contain anything embarrassing. Anger is ready to defend her time. And joy and sadness share a look, knowing that the richness of life lies precisely in holding all these truths simultaneously. The console lights up not with one dominant color, but with a swirling active blend, signifying that Riley has successfully navigated the treacherous transition into authentic, emotionally complex teenage identity. The continuous refinement of Riley's inner workings heralds the arrival of an emotion that feeds directly off the successful integration of her core group: self-acceptance. This is not a sudden burst of joy, nor is it the stoic resilience championed by sadness. Rather, it is a deep, quiet recognition of her own internal narrative as valid, flaws and all. Self-acceptance manifests as a steady, warm light emanating from the very center of the control panel, a light that calms anxiety's jittery circuits and validates envy's quiet aspirations. This newly established self-acceptance directly challenges the remnants of fear and embarrassment. Fear, seeing that the calculated risks are paying off and that small stumbles do not lead to catastrophe, begins to recede into a background monitoring role, his primary function now solely dedicated to tangible physical safety. He's concerned with bike helmets and traffic, not social standing. Embarrassment, finding validation in moments where Riley chooses vulnerability over curated perfection, often encouraged by sadness, stops hiding. It becomes the emotion that allows Riley to laugh at her own awkwardness, realizing that shared vulnerability is a powerful form of connection, mirroring the successful comedian who has moved beyond nervous energy into confident self-deprecation. Anger, observing that Riley is now capable of advocating for herself without resorting to outbursts, finds his energy directed towards preserving her newfound emotional boundaries. If an external party tries to pressure Riley into a commitment she doesn't want, perhaps a friend demanding she participate in something she finds morally questionable, anger serves as the internal roadblock, ensuring Riley's stated boundaries are enforced with an unyielding resolve. He becomes the internal bodyguard of her newly articulated values, a necessary force against external conformity. Disgust, too, finds a higher calling. No longer just rejecting bad tastes, she becomes the ultimate arbiter of personal integrity. She scrutinizes Riley's motivations. Are you doing this for genuine enjoyment, or are you doing this to impress anxiety's projection of a perfect future? This internal moral filter prevents Riley from slipping back into simply performing for external validation, ensuring that the achievements anxiety plans for are ones Riley actually desires. Joy, witnessing the holistic success, steps into a role closer to that of a chief vision officer. She focuses not on creating immediate happiness, but on ensuring the quality of the experience aligns with Riley's long-term vision for a fulfilling life. She champions projects that promise deep engagement, even if they involve temporary dips into sadness or stress from anxiety. She understands that true satisfaction is found in the engagement itself, not just the winning moment. The final synthesis of the control room showcases a truly mature emotional architecture. When Riley faces a significant decision, say choosing which friends to spend time with during a crucial social juncture, the console displays a rich tapestry of input. Anxiety provides the logistical analysis of potential outcomes. Sadness ensures Riley considers the feelings of those left behind. Joy reminds her of the value of fun. And self-acceptance anchors the final decision in what feels inherently right for who Riley is becoming. The result is not a perfectly happy teenager, but a deeply integrated, resilient young adult, capable of navigating the inevitable complexities of the next stage of life, with an internal team finally working in dynamic, respectful concert. The stabilization brought about by self-acceptance allows for a remarkable phenomenon: the emergence of ambivalence, an emotion previously impossible in Riley's black-and-white childhood worldview. Ambivalence isn't a conflict. It's the serene realization that two opposing, equally valid feelings can occupy the same space simultaneously. This is perhaps the most profound marker of her psychological evolution, mirroring the complexity seen in mature artistic endeavors, where triumph is tinged with melancholy, or great success is shadowed by necessary sacrifice. Ambivalence often appears when Riley has to make a choice between two desirable paths, say, spending time with her established hockey friends who offer comfort, driven by Joy's desire for familiarity, versus joining the debate club with her new acquaintance, which promises intellectual challenge but risks public failure, driven by anxiety's need for growth. Instead of one emotion forcing the other out, ambivalence settles over the console, allowing Riley to experience both the pull toward security and the pull toward challenge without immediate emotional deadlock. This new emotional texture profoundly affects anger's residual energy. Without the need to fight overwhelming external pressures or internal suppression, anger focuses his defensive fire inward, becoming the sharp voice that calls out self-sabotage. If Riley starts procrastinating simply because the task feels too hard, anger flares up, not in explosive rage, but with a crisp, pointed accusation. You know you can do this. Stop hiding behind excuses. He has become the internal accountability partner, the essential friction needed to move past comfortable inertia. Envy also undergoes a final, quiet transformation, catalyzed by self-acceptance. Realizing that her inherent worth is fixed, and not subject to external comparison, envy's energy dissipates. She doesn't disappear, but her comparison checks become almost academic, like a film historian studying box office returns without caring about current rankings. She serves as the quiet archive of what was once desired, allowing Riley to look back and appreciate how much her goals have organically shifted, rather than regretting paths not taken. Joy, now fully embracing her role as Chief Vision Officer, finds that her greatest contribution is simply maintaining the space for all other emotions to operate. She spends less time pulling levers and more time ensuring the console's energy flows are balanced. She recognizes that the richest memories are often those tinged with complexity. The late-night cram sessions where fear and anxiety kept them alert, followed by the relief celebrated by sadness and joy. The entire internal system now operates with an almost improvisational grace. When a genuine crisis hits, perhaps a major relationship falling apart or a significant academic failure, the emotions don't fight for control. Instead, they fall into sequence. Sadness takes the lead to process the pain. Anxiety immediately drafts adaptive strategies. Anger prepares the boundary setting required for self-preservation. And joy works to archive the event in a way that preserves hope for future connection. Self-acceptance acts as the overall power source, ensuring that whatever sequence plays out, Riley believes in the validity of the feeling. The mind is no longer striving for an impossible plateau of sustained happiness, but for a continuous, honest engagement with the turbulent, beautiful reality of human experience. The successful establishment of ambivalence and self-acceptance unlocks a truly sophisticated level of cognitive function, best exemplified by the emergence of perspective. This isn't a core emotion, but a meta-process, a high-level filtering system often residing in the uppermost tier of the control room, analogous to a senior executive reviewing long-term corporate strategy. Perspective is the result of anxiety's meticulous planning being tempered by nostalgia, and sadness is wisdom. Perspective allows Riley to view current setbacks not as defining moments, but as small, temporary data points in a much longer, evolving timeline. When a social misstep occurs, perspective steps in, immediately overlaying the immediate sting with the context of the past 5 years of emotional growth. This process is similar to a seasoned director looking back at their very first short film. They recognize its flaws, but appreciate it as a vital, necessary step toward their current mastery. This heightened sense of perspective significantly alters the function of disgust. Her critical eye now focuses almost exclusively on future-proofing Riley's emotional integrity against manipulation. She becomes acutely attuned to situations where others, whether peers or even well-meaning adults, attempt to impose simplistic narratives onto Riley's complex feelings. Disgust becomes the internal gatekeeper against toxic positivity or forced cheerfulness, rejecting any external pressure that seeks to overwrite the nuanced truth established by the internal counsel. Ennui, having found her niche as the censor for unfulfilling obligation, starts to offer surprising insights when she surfaces. Because she is so attuned to wasted effort, Ennui can often pinpoint the exact moment Riley's motivation dips below sustainable levels, allowing anxiety to adjust the pacing of a heavy workload before burnout sets in. She becomes the unheralded champion of mental efficiency, advocating for strategic periods of absolute stillness to recharge creative batteries. Joy and sadness have settled into a rhythm that resembles a highly successful co-authoring team. Joy provides the forward momentum and the narrative drive toward positive outcomes, while sadness provides the necessary depth, ensuring that the narrative arcs have weight and emotional resonance. They understand that the most compelling stories and the most resilient personalities are those that have navigated genuine sorrow. Their collaboration creates memories that are not just happy, but meaningful. The final visualization of Riley's inner world is one of profound integration. There are no longer distinct factions vying for the main lever. Instead, the console resembles a complex mixing board from a professional recording studio, where every emotional input is finely tuned and balanced. When Riley smiles now, it is a deeply earned expression, a smile that contains the energy of ambivalence, the caution of fear, the strategic planning of anxiety, and the essential, unwavering warmth of joy, all acknowledged by the steadfast light of self-acceptance. She is fully equipped, not for perpetual ease, but for authentic complexity. The culmination of these integrated emotional departments ushers in the final subtle layer of development, the realization of awe. This emotion is not a byproduct of any single controller. It is the spontaneous resonance that occurs when the entire system operates in harmony, directed by the overarching wisdom of perspective. Awe is the feeling Riley experiences when she witnesses the sheer scale and complexity of the world, or when she perceives a moment of profound beauty or connection that transcends the petty concerns of social standing or immediate achievement. Awe manifests as a sudden quieting of the console, a momentary suspension of all active management. Anxiety pauses her frantic projections, envy freezes her comparison scans, and even ennui seems to hold her breath. The light emanating from self-acceptance intensifies, bathing the entire control room in a luminous, non-demanding glow. This feeling is the emotional equivalent of an artist finally stepping back from their completed, complex canvas and realizing with humility the vastness of the creative space they have successfully navigated. This newfound capacity for awe fundamentally recalibrates the definition of success. For Riley, success is no longer measured by the peak achieved, joy's early metric, or the disaster avoided, anxiety's mandate, but by the depth of her engagement with existence. Awe allows her to appreciate the elegance of a complex mathematical proof, the breathtaking silence of a winter landscape, or the intricate web of relationships she maintains, moments where the self dissolves slightly into something larger. The established emotions adopt roles befitting this elevated state. Anger, when awe surfaces, becomes the fierce protector of Riley's capacity for wonder. He fiercely defends Riley's time against scheduling intrusions that would fill every minute with productive noise, ensuring the quiet spaces necessary for awe to manifest are protected. Embarrassment, having learned to laugh at its own history, finds itself transformed into humility. When awe strikes, humility prompts Riley to recognize her smallness in the grand scheme, not as a source of fear, but as a source of immense liberation. The pressure to be the best disappears when one realizes they are part of something infinitely greater and more mysterious than individual metrics. The co-authors, Joy and Sadness, now collaborate on framing experiences for awe. Joy provides the exhilaration of recognition, while sadness ensures that the experience is tempered by the awareness that all beautiful moments are transient. This duality creates the quintessential feeling of profound appreciation, the simultaneous joy that something is, and the gentle sorrow that it will pass. Riley's journey is complete, not because she has eliminated negative emotions, but because she has integrated them so thoroughly that they now serve as scaffolding for her highest emotional experiences. The final picture is of a mind that has moved beyond mere management into genuine understanding. Riley can now experience the sharp, painful beauty of a fully lived life, acknowledging that her emotional landscape, once a source of internal civil war, is now a richly textured, self-regulating ecosystem capable of registering everything from the mundane anxiety of homework to the sublime mystery of existence itself. The sophomore outing for Riley Anderson, now navigating the tumultuous waters of early adolescence, provides fertile ground for an exploration of emotional complexity that deepens the foundation laid by the original film. Inside Out 2 shifts the central focus from pure emotional reaction to the nuanced layering of identity construction under social pressure. The introduction of anxiety, personified with a taut energy reminiscent of the relentless drive often seen in high-achieving professionals, immediately sets a new, more demanding tone for headquarters. This film masterfully uses anxiety not as a mere villain, but as a brutally efficient, albeit misguided project manager. Her relentless pursuit of future optimization mirrors the very real societal expectation placed upon today's youth to be constantly prepared, credentialed, and socially adept. Joy, initially positioned as the dominant force, finds her control slipping, a palpable metaphor for the loss of childhood simplicity. Riley's inherent optimism, once the bedrock of her personality, is now constantly being interrogated by the fear of inadequacy. The quartet of older emotions, joy, sadness, anger, and disgust, represent established management styles. Joy embodies the charismatic, vision-driven CEO who believes sheer positive energy can solve all problems. Sadness, who earned her stripes in the first film by demonstrating the necessity of vulnerability, now struggles to be heard above the clamor of self-doubt. Anger, the embodiment of righteous indignation against perceived unfairness, finds his purpose complicated when the unfairness is largely internal. The fear of not fitting in. Disgust, always the gatekeeper of taste and social standards, becomes more crucial, vetting Riley's choices through the lens of peer approval rather than simple aversion to spoiled food. The newcomers are not mere accessories, they function as specialized departments within the developing psyche. Envy, with her observational stillness and yearning, speaks volumes about the digital age's comparison culture, where one's self-worth is perpetually measured against curated highlight reels. Ennui, The seemingly lethargic but deeply influential presence embodies burnout and the sheer exhaustion of maintaining a complex emotional facade. Her low energy state acts as a necessary, if disruptive, brake on anxiety's runaway train. Finally, embarrassment, quiet and prone to physical withdrawal, represents the acute sensitivity to public scrutiny that defines the teenage experience. The narrative drive pivots on the schism between the old gang and the new guard, symbolizing the internal conflict when one's established sense of self clashes with the urgent demands of a changing social landscape. Riley's dedication to hockey, once a pure source of passion, becomes another performance metric managed by anxiety, pushing her toward a team where she is uncertain if she truly belongs. The central conflict is externalized, the metaphorical sending away of the original emotions, which translates directly to the human tendency to suppress feelings deemed unproductive or uncool during formative social interactions. The climax, involving the creation of the self-concept storage and the eventual reintegration, is visually inventive. The concept of the self as a complex scaffolding system, rather than a single monolithic structure, is key. It suggests that identity is not fixed at age 12 but is an ongoing construction project. The film advocates for a mature emotional ecosystem where all inputs, even the discomforting ones like anxiety, are acknowledged as vital data points for survival and growth, rather than obstacles to be bulldozed by relentless cheerfulness. The resolution suggests that true integration means allowing sadness and anxiety to coexist, recognizing that worrying about the future is sometimes the necessary prerequisite to making meaningful connections in the present. It's a sophisticated argument for emotional honesty disguised as a vibrant animated adventure. The film excels in portraying anxiety's operational style, which heavily borrows from modern corporate restructuring. She doesn't seek to destroy joy. Rather, she seeks to radically reallocate joy's resources. Anxiety's planning meetings involve detailed Gantt charts projected onto the mind's skylight, charting every potential social pitfall in the upcoming high school year. This mirrors the career anxiety prevalent in contemporary society, where early success is often framed as the only acceptable trajectory. Anxiety's initial successes feel rewarding because she prevents immediate, small-scale embarrassments, a slightly awkward introduction here, a poorly phrased comment there. But this constant vigilance drains the core system of its spontaneity. Joy, fighting for relevance, sometimes resembles a legacy executive whose innovative methods have become obsolete against new technological demands. Her attempts to micromanage happiness feel increasingly desperate, manifesting as overly enthusiastic, perhaps even performative displays of excitement that feel inauthentic to the developing Riley. The subtle ways the original emotions react to being sidelined are deeply relatable. Anger, stripped of his immediate targets, begins to stew quietly, manifesting in internal grumbling rather than explosive outbursts, perhaps channeling his energy into sharp, critical internal monologues about perceived slights from new acquaintances. The subplot involving the relationship with new friend Maya further illustrates the tension between authentic self and curated persona. Maya, herself a product of her own emotional management team, likely featuring a very assertive disgust and a highly organized anxiety, represents the desirable peer group Riley desperately wishes to access. Riley's attempts to mirror Maya's behavior, driven by the new guard's directives, highlight the fragile nature of nascent friendships built on imitation rather than shared core values. Ennui's presence is particularly nuanced. While appearing inert, her subtle influence, a slow, heavy sigh that dampens an otherwise energetic idea from joy, acts as a necessary quality control check against overexcitement. She embodies the realization that not every moment demands peak performance. Sometimes, the most emotionally honest state is mild apathy born from sheer mental fatigue. This contrasts sharply with the boundless energy of the original Joy, who, in the first film, seemed to run on perpetual motion without acknowledging the need for system downtime. The ultimate breakthrough when Riley embraces her true, complex self involves a recognition that sadness is crucial not just for comfort, but for genuine connection. When Riley finally allows herself to feel the complex layers of disappointment, not just simple unhappiness, but the disappointment of realizing she might not measure up, she opens the door for sadness and anxiety to work collaboratively. Anxiety can then pivot from preemptive panic to strategic planning based on realistic self-assessment, supported by sadness's grounding empathy. The visual representation of the self-concept finally stabilizing, incorporating the jagged edges and mismatched pieces that anxiety tried to discard, underscores the film's thesis. A robust identity requires acknowledging the full spectrum of lived experience, imperfections included. It suggests that true leadership within the mind requires humility. A quality Joy is forced to learn when she realizes her singular focus on brightness blinds her to necessary shadows. The nuanced interplay between the established and emergent emotional cadres paints a vivid portrait of internal psychological maturation. Anxiety's methods, for instance, are often rooted in retrospective analysis turned prospective fear. She pores over memories cataloged by Joy, not to relive moments of triumph, but to identify potential failure vectors for future interactions. This obsessive data mining is less about learning and more about creating elaborate contingency plans for scenarios that are statistically unlikely but emotionally devastating to contemplate. Her insistence on meticulous control is fueled by a deep-seated fear, hinted at through subtle visual cues, that without her vigilance, Riley will be utterly exposed and rejected, a primal social fear codified into a high-functioning neurosis. Joy's transformation throughout this sequel is particularly compelling because she is forced to confront the limitations of relentless positivity. She begins to exhibit traits that, in a corporate setting, might be labeled as micromanagement or inflexibility. When Riley begins to pull away from her core friendship group to align with the more sophisticated new social circle, Joy's attempts to inject mandatory fun into every interaction come across as patronizing rather than supportive. She is effectively the veteran employee watching the company culture shift, clinging to old metrics of success while the younger, more ruthless metrics, defined by anxiety and disgust, take hold. Her initial reaction to being relegated to the back of the control panel is a powerful depiction of ego bruising, a necessary step before she can embrace a supporting role. Disgust's evolution is perhaps the most sociologically relevant. In the first film, her role was straightforward. Reject the rotten, the unsavory. Here, she becomes the arbiter of social currency. She critiques Riley's wardrobe, the inflection of her voice, and the content of her social media posts, all through the lens of ensuring she aligns with the perceived cool aesthetic of the popular group. This shift reflects how early adolescence transforms personal preference into social performance. What Riley likes is secondary to what the accepted peer group deems worthy of liking. Disgust operates less from personal revulsion and more from the mandate of social survival. The film smartly avoids portraying the development of the self-concept as a clean, linear assembly process. The structure that emerges is deliberately messy, a vibrant collage rather than a sleek, modern edifice. This visual metaphor underscores the idea that a stable adult identity is built not by discarding parts of the past, but by weaving them into a larger, often contradictory tapestry. When Riley finally achieves a moment of authentic self-expression, a moment Joy's methods alone could never orchestrate, it is a synthesis of her innate curiosity, perhaps hinted at by a flicker of an old hobby in the background, filtered through the sober understanding provided by sadness and the strategic foresight of anxiety. The film ultimately champions emotional intelligence, where acknowledging the full spectrum of internal advisors, even the ones who raise alarms constantly, leads to better, more sustainable decisions than operating under a single, overly bright mandate. The introduction of anxiety in her crew necessitates a deep dive into the mechanics of self-censorship that plague adolescents navigating new social hierarchies. Anxiety's primary tool is not outright blocking, but rather nuanced suggestion, implemented through whispers and projected scenarios that slow Riley's natural emotional responses. This internal committee structure mirrors the real-world phenomenon of imposter syndrome, where the individual doubts their accomplishments and fears being found out. For Riley, every casual conversation at hockey practice becomes an audition, a high-stakes environment where a single misplaced word or expression of genuine, unpolished feeling could trigger the catastrophic collapse of her carefully constructed social standing. This pressure disproportionately affects Anger, who thrives on direct confrontation and clarity of purpose. In the original film, Anger could easily pinpoint an external injustice, like a perceived slight from a teammate or unfair coaching. Now, the targets are diffuse and often internalized. Is the coach unfair, or is Riley simply not good enough? Is Maya being genuinely friendly, or is she sizing Riley up? This ambiguity leaves Anger frustrated, often resulting in him becoming a silent, simmering source of tension, ready to explode over minor infractions because the major threats remain too abstract and complex for his direct approach. His inaction, born from confusion over accountability, signals a loss of agency that is deeply unsettling for the entire emotional team. Furthermore, the film brilliantly explores the concept of emotional debt. Every moment Riley spends forcing a smile, agreeing with sentiments she doesn't fully hold, or neglecting an old passion to conform to the new, builds up an invisible ledger. Anxiety believes she is paying down the debt of potential future shame, but in reality, she is accumulating psychological interest. The system becomes overloaded not from external stressors alone, but from the sheer cognitive load required to maintain an inauthentic presentation. This mirrors the burnout experienced by young adults who pursue careers or lifestyles dictated by external validation. The structure looks sound on paper, managed by anxiety, but the internal foundation is cracking from suppressed exhaustion, ennui's domain. The climax's resolution, emphasizing collaboration over conquest, is a significant maturation point for Joy. She has to learn that being the leader doesn't mean monopolizing the driver's seat. It means ensuring all necessary navigation systems are operational. Her acceptance of anxiety's input, not as a threat, but as a vital early warning system, is the key to unlocking Riley's authentic self. It posits that healthy adolescence is not about eliminating worry, but about reframing worry from a paralyzing force into a data-driven tool for cautious, informed engagement. The final synthesis suggests that the best version of Riley is one who can feel the thrill of joy, the sting of sadness, the caution of anxiety, and the critical eye of disgust, all operating in concert to navigate the complex terrain of being human. The sequel's success hinges on its ability to translate the abstract mechanics of adolescent social navigation into tangible, high-stakes internal drama. Consider the evolving relationship between disgust and envy. Disgust, the seasoned curator of social acceptability, initially views envy as an unruly apprentice, a new emotion whose metrics seem too focused on acquisition rather than refinement. However, as Riley becomes increasingly consumed by comparing herself to her peers, disgust finds herself relying heavily on envy's reconnaissance. Envy, perched silently observing the perceived successes of others, Maya's effortless charm, the easy camaraderie of the established clique, provides disgust with the precise data points needed to adjust Riley's outward presentation. This dynamic perfectly illustrates how modern self-consciousness is often driven by external mirroring. Disgust doesn't initiate the comparison, but she weaponizes the resulting envy to ensure Riley doesn't fall too far behind the perceived curve. This entire apparatus of self-monitoring has a tangible effect on Anger. When Riley feels a surge of resentment towards a teammate or a fleeting annoyance with Maya, anxiety immediately flags the impending outburst as a high-risk social contagion event. Before anger can even fully form the thought, anxiety deploys a buffer, often a gentle nudge from embarrassment to pull Riley's shoulders in, or a sudden distracting influx of ennui's heavy lethargy designed to deflate the aggressive impulse. Anger's character arc thus becomes one of profound frustration. His energy, once channeled effectively against external unfairness, is now perpetually dampened by internal security protocols. He becomes a pressure cooker, his potential energy building until it finds the smallest, most benign release, a sharp text message composed late at night, or an internal monologue of scathing judgment directed at the very people Riley is trying to impress. The visual storytelling surrounding the self-concept storage deserves further analysis. It is not depicted as a neat set of organized belief boards, but rather as a chaotic, constantly shifting construction zone, a digital mood board overlaid with architectural blueprints. When anxiety first tries to take over, she attempts to bulldoze the older, simpler structures built by the original five, favoring sleek, modern, and highly functional modules based on future achievement. The tragedy of the central conflict is that these new modules, lacking the foundational strength derived from past experiences validated by sadness, are inherently unstable. The moment Riley faces genuine failure in the high-stakes game, anxiety's perfect projections shatter, causing the entire scaffolding to wobble precariously. It is only when sadness steps in to validate the pain of falling short that the structure gains the necessary ballast, allowing joy and anxiety to finally work together, joy providing the resilience to stand back up, and anxiety providing the measured plan for the next attempt. The film offers a compelling psychological argument. True self-worth isn't about believing you are perfect. It's about trusting that you can handle the inevitable imperfections. The film's structural genius lies in how it externalizes the concept of the inner critic through anxiety, presenting her not as a villain but as an overzealous, inadequately trained middle manager, promoted far beyond her competence. Her relentless focus on future-proofing Riley's life often results in a peculiar kind of emotional stagnation. By obsessing over preventing every conceivable negative outcome, a rejection letter, a failed pass in a hockey game, a misjudged social cue, anxiety inadvertently prevents Riley from engaging in the very risk-taking necessary for authentic growth. This is where ennui becomes an inadvertent ally, albeit an unwilling one. Ennui's pervasive low-grade exhaustion functions as a necessary system overload warning, a psychic speed bump that briefly halts anxiety's forward momentum. When Riley is simply too tired to care about the hypothetical future scenario anxiety is currently detailing, a moment of genuine, unmanaged present reality seeps through. This hints at the vital role of mental rest in preventing an identity crisis fueled solely by performance metrics. Joy's struggle mirrors the disillusionment of a high-achieving visionary whose initial success was built on sheer force of will, now facing a world that demands nuanced emotional intelligence she hasn't yet acquired. Her desperate attempts to reassert control often involve trying to retrofit old solutions onto new problems. She tries to inject mandatory cheer into situations requiring quiet empathy or thoughtful processing. Her initial inability to understand why Riley is withdrawing stems from her core programming. If things look happy on the surface, the system is functional. The gradual realization that genuine happiness requires acknowledging and processing negative feelings, a concept sadness championed but joy never fully integrated, is Joy's true character development. She learns that being the positive bedrock means supporting the entire emotional structure, not just illuminating the highest spire. The exploration of Riley's changing friendships also reveals the subtle influence of embarrassment. This emotion is highly reactive to perceived negative judgment, often acting before Riley consciously recognizes the threat. A slight frown from a new acquaintance is instantly registered by embarrassment, who throws up internal red flares, often causing Riley to physically recoil or retreat into silence. This involuntary self-cancellation is particularly damaging because it preempts any chance for anger to defend, sadness to connect, or even joy to offer genuine enthusiasm. Embarrassment essentially locks the door before anyone can knock. The film suggests that overcoming adolescence is learning to weather the storm of social judgment without letting embarrassment seize control, allowing Riley to remain present enough for genuine connection to form, messy interactions and all. The final harmonization shows a brain that is not perfectly ordered, but robustly anti-fragile, ready to absorb the inevitable hits of social life because its emotional foundations are multi-layered and mutually supportive. The complexity deepens when observing how the new emotions interact not just with the established core, but with each other, forming unexpected alliances that define Riley's shifting social strategies. Envy, whose gaze is perpetually fixed outward, occasionally finds herself in league with anxiety, but for different ends. Anxiety wants to control the future outcome. Envy simply wants the status of what someone else already possesses. This subtle divergence is crucial. When Riley is debating whether to attend a party, anxiety worries about the logistics of getting invited and the potential awkwardness upon arrival. Envy, however, is focused solely on the social capital gained by being seen at that exact location. Disgust often acts as the moderator between these two, ensuring that the pursuit of envy-driven status doesn't violate disgust's fundamental aesthetic standards. A scenario where Riley might covet a popular friend's expensive jacket, envy's goal, but reject the friend themselves as being tacky, disgust's veto. Anger's forced dormancy provides a fascinating study in redirected psychological energy. His pent-up frustration doesn't vanish. It atomizes into sharp, highly critical internal monologue, an unseen current of judgment that runs beneath Riley's surface interactions. When Riley is trying to be agreeable to Maya, anger is mentally composing scathing critiques of Maya's self-absorption. This internalized negativity, fueled by the inability to express legitimate frustration, paradoxically makes Riley seem less genuine, creating the very awkwardness anxiety was desperately trying to avoid. This illustrates a key point. Suppressing necessary negative responses doesn't eliminate conflict. It merely internalizes it, turning the emotional landscape into a minefield of unvoiced grievances. The film's most potent visual metaphor remains the self-concept storage, now understood as a living archive rather than a static museum. When the original emotions are cast out, the structures representing Riley's core values, like good teammate or funny friend, begin to flicker and degrade, starved of the genuine feeling that originally powered them. Anxiety's attempts to rapidly reconstruct these concepts using high achievement and popular acceptance results in brittle, veneer-like constructs. These new identity markers are purely conditional, reliant on external reinforcement. The moment that reinforcement wavers, a bad game, a slight from a new friend, the entire structure built under anxiety's direction is susceptible to immediate collapse. This highlights the psychological fragility inherent in identity, built solely on meeting external expectations, contrasting sharply with the resilient, albeit sometimes painful foundations built when sadness validates disappointment and joy acknowledges effort. The final integration is thus a testament to systemic resilience. The mind requires contradictory inputs, the fear of loss, anxiety, and the acceptance of imperfection, sadness, to build an identity robust enough to withstand the inevitable turbulence of emerging adulthood. The evolution of sadness throughout this narrative arc is perhaps the most subtle yet profound victory for the film's psychological realism. In the first installment, sadness